Welcome back. It's GRD 121 Computer Graphics to part 3 of our BF Apple mug, and we'll be doing the mug part. And before I actually started here, but I'm going to open up my previous one that I did. Here's my previous one. And just to look at what we're going to do with the mug, the body of the mug itself is going to be made out of an oval, and then we're going to chop the top, chop the bottom by using subtract with rectangles. And then we're going to put a little lip on here with an oval, which will overlap it. We'll put a little lip up here with an oval, the same color, and then we're just going to put a brown shape on top. Now that won't be part of the compound path. That'll just be a separate shape that's on top. So this shape up here, you can move out of the way. So the body of the mug is going to be more like that, and then we're just putting this thing on top, and then we're going to use intersect to make that little swirl in the middle. It's just two circles, just like we made the leaf on the apple, except this is like a Nike swoosh kind of. We're going to do there out of two shapes with a subtract, and that'll be the accents at the end. And then we're going to make a handle, but this handle is going to be see-through, so this isn't just white here. We're going to make almost another compound path, kind of like the letter O. Think about the letter O as a compound path, meaning it has an inner path and an outer path. So we're going to do a compound path there that has a hole in it that's transparent, and I'll have a handout on compound paths and things like that so you see them, so you know that they can have transparent areas, and they're basically two paths into one. The last thing we'll do is we'll put a shadow on here, and I'll show you how to kind of squish that and skew it a little bit with that transform palette. They have a skew thing in there. So that's what we're going to do here. But again, we're going to start with a big egg shape, squash it. This part's almost like the top of a wine glass a little bit, but without curving in. So we're just going to chop a little bit off the bottom from an oval, and then work from there. So I'm going to go back, file that I was working on, which was for BF Apple mug, and I'm going to make a new page, brand new page over here, not a layer, brand new page. And I'll call it mug right away, and just hit enter, return when you're done. And I'll zoom in and kind of work near the top of the page. If I want to turn the layers panel off so I could see a little bit better, I could do that. Then I could even zoom in a little bit more. Now we're going to start with an oval. So we're going to make an ellipse, and I'll just make it so it fits in my screen like a big egg. Starting off with a big egg, and don't worry about the color yet. It can be the regular gray. And we're going to chop off the top. And you might say, well, how do we chop off the top? We use subtract. We're going to make a rectangle and just chop off the top. And you can make it a different color too, so that might help you visualize this gray part. So we want to visualize the gray part. And it doesn't matter if this is left or right. What does matter is you don't want to have it like that. You want to make sure it's, I'm going to grab it there. Make sure it's overlapping completely. So we're looking at this shape. Now remember, it's not a wine glass, it's a mug. So I'm going to move down a little bit and then stretch this up. And so that when I go to outline view, it's completely overlapping. So even if you went in outline view to do this, this could help. So I could drag this down a little. It's getting more like a mug, because a mug doesn't really start to curl in. So I'm kind of go down here a little bit more. So that, I guess, looks like a mug, and we could squash it in later. So that's what we're going to do to start. And I'll take it out of outline view. And before I do anything else, I'll just select both of these. You could drag through them. Just drag a selection box through them. You don't have to be all around them, just through them. And we're going to go right over here, and we're going to say subtract, because the top shape is going to subtract. It should chop it out. There it is. Now, I still have that other shape there. Let's get rid of it. Let's do the squiggle or the convert to path and get rid of it and make it a permanent shape. If I could see my layers there, it would just say path right now. If I needed to prove that to you, I'll just use my sub-select tool. Now you can see the anchor points. But I'll go back to my regular pointer. All right, so there's my shape. Now, you could stretch this a little if you think, oh, that's a little too, too short. Is this a fancy coffee mug, like an after-dinner coffee mug in a fancy restaurant, or just something you have for breakfast? But I'm going to chop off the bottom now, so I'm going to do the bottom the same way I did the top. I'm going to use a rectangle and just chop off the bottom and just draw it down there. And make it a different color, I guess, to help me visualize it. You could even make it white if you want, or really light gray, or I guess just white, just as long as you know it's still there. And that way you can kind of click off it and visualize it and say, yeah, that looks okay. And again, we can squash it to make it narrower. So I'm going to move this down, maybe down just a little bit, Seems like my screen's slowing down a little bit here as we're working off the web. So every once in a while it'll start slowing down a little bit. If you ever have weird things, just save your file and then close it and open it up again. I had some weird thing happening earlier with selecting things and it wasn't selecting them by putting boxes around them. So I just closed it. When it opened up again, it was fine. So we're going to use this shape here to chop off that. So I need to highlight both of them. And as long as you just go through them, that's fine. And again, it's subtract. So when you're chopping, you're using subtract. And there it is. So there's the body of our mug. And if you're still seeing that thing there, just get rid of it. Just you squiggle, we'll get rid of it. Now it's a path. So we're going to add a little lip down here. So I'm going to zoom in to that as much as I can. Remember, hold your space bar if you ever have to just move the page. And I'm going to make another ellipse down here. And just real tiny. Just so it goes across. And very little bit of a lip. And I'll even go back into outline view and I'll zoom in more because I just want a little bit of a lip. So I'll stretch this up just a little. And it's just so it looks like it could set down, even though you might not even have a lip on the bottom of a mug like that, but just very slight. And if you wanted to center these, you can highlight them and use this center thing. Then you know it would be perfect. But that lip is probably okay, and I'm going to go back into my regular view and turn off outline view, and you can see that lip looks okay. And I'm just going to unite it again. So I'm just going to keep, it's like you're playing with clay and you're just adding lumps of clay together and making it come together. I guess that's a good analogy for this thing, because even when we make the handle, picture making a handle like rolling up a piece of clay, you know, kind of like a snake thing, and making your handle out of that. If we're doing coil clay, not on a pot, obviously. But if you did that, you would kind of add it at the end, and that's what we're going to do. So we're putting this on the bottom, and I'm going to unite it just to make it all as one. And you might as well do the squiggle right away. Now this looks pretty good, but we're going to round off the top so we see a little coffee in it. Even though it's not perfectly in perspective that way, it'll just look more like a coffee cup if we could see some coffee in it. So I'm going to make one more oval just like I did on the bottom, except this one's going to line up to the top. It's not going to, I'll make it go over and I'll zoom in and I'll go in the outline view so I can see things even a little better. I'll hold my space bar and move it up. What I want to do now is just kind of make sure that the edge of this over here lines up. Now I don't want it looking like that, and I don't want it too far in. Now I'm exaggerating obviously, but I want to be on the line as best I can. And same thing over here. I don't want it overlapping. I don't want it in too far. I want it almost right on the line. Now, like I said, it may not be perfect. You may see a little tiny bit there. If I come in slightly, that might be okay. It's hard to get it perfect, but that looks pretty perfect from what I'm looking at right now. And if you needed to squash it a little more, you could go here and squash it just a little bit, although that may make that corner come up a little. So I may have to nudge it a little, which probably undid what I just did. But anyway, that's what I want at the top. So just a little ridge going around the top. So I'm going to go to view and turn off outline view, and that looks good. And I'm going to unite that. And you might say, well, wait a minute, how are you going to make it look like it's empty? Well, we're going to put a brown oval on top. So I'm just going to unite this and use union. And I'm using some of these terms because Illustrator used to have different terms like unite and minus front. But these are pretty generic terms you'll see in 3D programs as well. And these are called Boolean operations. If you heard the woman in the first video say that. A Boolean means you're joining things, you're subtracting things. You could do that with 3D shapes as well. That's how you build things in 3D when you're modeling. So I'm going to use union here because I want it to be all one. And then I'll even use the squiggle and make it all one path. So actually, if I brought out my layers panel, I should only have one path there because I kept using union and I kept turning him into a path. So I only have one path right now. And, you know, that's simpler to work with instead of having a whole bunch of compound paths over here. So I have one path right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little oval up here to be the coffee. And I'm just going to draw it as best I can. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now it's going to come in a little so that it looks like the edge of the cup. Now I'm not going to be able to match it perfectly, but I want that arc of my oval to be very close to the arc of the mug. Right away I could make it brown if I want. Now you might go over here and go, where the hell's brown? Do I got to use this thing? The easiest thing with brown is just go to orange and then go to dark orange. And that's a good way to make it brown. And if you want it cooler, move away from the saturation. You can see it's real saturated here. Move away over this into the grays, and then you could get kind of a darker coffee color if you want. If you want it warmer, whatever. There's pumpkin, whatever. So you could just leave it brown for now. So that's the inside of the coffee mug. And obviously if you make it shorter, it'll make the ridge look thicker. It'll make everything look thicker. So if you made this a little bit smaller, if you even went to size here, you know, you could do something like that. You could use this thing. See, if you moved it in here, now it looks like it's really thick, which I don't want, but you can adjust the size a little bit to make the edges look a little thicker. There's a lot of stuff you could do here. This is real basic. Again, this is only exercise 4, so this will not be a perfect coffee mug. Now, before I put the arm on here, or the handle, I'm going to put the little, I'll call this the Nike swoosh. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this shape, the same shape, right here. Now, I didn't do anything with it. It's just right here. And I'm going to copy it. I'll do a drag copy, and I'll put it up here. And then I'm going to drag copy again and make... This thing is going to be the shape that cuts out of it. Now, it's hard to see what's going on right now, so let me make it a different color. And I'll make it, you know, green or something. I'll make it pink. And there you can see what we're going for is this brown part is going to be like the little white highlight in there. So I'm using this pink thing. It's on top. That means it's going to subtract. When we subtract, it's going to cut out of the bottom shape. And before you do that, because this will be kind of permanent, that's our little Nike swoosh there, kind of our upside down Nike swoosh. And that's okay. I mean, that looks fine. It's just in the middle of a coffee. It's just meant to look like a ripple. So we could put multiple ones in here. But I'm going to highlight these two shapes up here. And I'm going to do you remember which one? You remember? Everybody yell out. Subtract. We're going to subtract that. Now, obviously, putting this over top is too big, and it's not the right color. So let me make it a different color. I'll go down to my fill, and I'll stay within the brown family, and I'll just make it kind of like really light. And I could go in here. Now, if you're still seeing that other shape, you can use the squiggle and change it, and then you can make this whole thing smaller and squish it, and I could zoom in more. You could do what you want. You could squish it more, put it in there. You could even make multiple ripples if you want, but that's basically what we're doing with that thing. That little Nike swoosh is being our ripple. And the last thing we're going to do, other than the shadows, we're going to throw a handle on here. And I mentioned we're going to do the handle separately and then connect it. So this won't take long. If you're thinking, oh my God, this is going to take a long time. How long is this video going? Not that long. We're going to take an ellipse, and we're going to just kind of make like an ear. And we'll just get the basic shape and put it there so it looks like an ear on it. And rotate it and reshape it so it looks about the way a handle would look. Obviously, the hole in the handle isn't there yet. But if you just kind of look at it and think, yeah, that looks pretty good, you know, on what your idea of a handle on a mug would be, something like that. That looks about where it would be. Not, you know, it's not going to be out here too far. You know, it's going to be embedded into it a little bit. And again, it's like we're looking at it from, you know, from straight on, turning the mug out sideways. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to make another oval in here. Not actually make an oval, but duplicate one and make it smaller. So what we'll do is we'll do Command D, and it'll make one right on top. Now you could do it manually, or you could even just take the size thing over here and do something like that. Now it's not doing it on center. Let me see. If you did something like this, now it's kind of moving on center, or you didn't even have to do that. Doing that transform thing, I don't know if it really helped or not, but I'm just kind of putting that so it looks. Now don't grab this to move it, because when you see this thing, that's the transform handle. So if you don't like doing that, that way just kind of move this shape around. Now it's filled with gray, and I'm just going to move it here so it looks about. Now the handle's not going to look perfectly the same. Remember, it's a little heavier probably up here, you know, like the letter O in Times New Roman. It's probably a little heavier up here, a little thinner here, a little heavier at the bottom. That's good. If you want to change color to see what it looks like, that's fine too. I'll make it like just a real, I'll make it yellow, and you can kind of see what's happening. Now we don't want it to go into here. We're only going to kind of make this like letter O shape, and then we're going to connect it. So as long as you want to mess around with this a little bit, I guess that looks better. It's a little thicker. Bring that down. So that looks pretty good, I think. I mean, it's okay. And again, it's not going to come in here, so that part you won't be seeing that going into the mug. But what we're doing, we're only worrying about these two shapes right now. Those two shapes. And what we're going to do is we're going to punch out the yellow from that. And that's the same way we've been punching out things by using subtract. As long as the yellow's on top of the gray, we could go here and do subtract, and it's going to make a compound shape. Subtract, and you can see now it's transparent. I could see through it. So it's like there's nothing there. It's like these two paths are creating one path. That's called a compound path. And right off the bat, I think I'll do this. I think I'll do the squiggle and convert to path. And then we can make a union, or kind of like weld it together, of this thing and that thing, so they become one, and then we won't have any overlap. Now you could just group it, that would be fine. As long as we've been using these tools, let's finish it up, and we're going to make a union of the handle and the mug. So I'm going to select the handle, which is now one big shape, and if you're not sure, go over here and turn it off and on. There it is. It's like a letter O that's italic. And then I'm going to hold my shift key and click on this. So we have this shape, the path, which is the mug body. I'll move up a little. The mug body. None of that stuff, none of the coffee or any of that. Just the mug body, which is one path, and this compound path. And we should be able to do a union. Sometimes if you try to do a compound path with a single path, you have problems, but let's just see what happens here. It should be okay if we do a union. And there it is. Now you can see what happened. It united it all together. Now we can do the convert to path to make it permanent. And there it is. Now if you wanted to move your mug around or your handle, you can't. But if you make it permanent, now it looks good. Now, of course, you're going, well, where did the coffee go? The coffee just went underneath. So whenever you do an operation like that, it brings it to the front. So you could always go over here. They have like a send backward button. Here's a send backwards button. I'll send it back, send it back. Now it moved it back here. We could have just moved it in the layer palette as well. But we basically just moved this whole gray shape is now behind there. And if you want to give it a little bit of a gradient, you could go in here, because it's just the generic gray right now. You could go in here and give it a linear gradient. Now that's going from like kind of white to black. That's probably a little too much. And you could go over here, maybe make it a little warmer. Like I said, if you move over here and you get into the orange, you can make it a little warmer on that side. And then over here, I'll go in here, maybe move this thing around to orange, but kind of go down here a little bit, kind of more in the grayers. I don't want it to be really a warm color. I just want it to look like, I guess, like ceramic a little bit. So I'll kind of go down there, and you could even move this out if it's too dark. You can move it out a little. You can put on an angle a little bit. It's a little easier with the linear gradient. That way, if I want to go in that direction, that looks a little better. With a light source up here coming down, because that's where our light source is on the coffee. And that looks okay. And that's pretty much our mug. The one thing I mentioned is throwing a shadow on here. And I guess I'll do that as the last thing, because it might give it a little depth. I'm basically going to copy this outer path. And I'm just going to do a drag copy. And you could do a Command D, but I'll just do a drag copy. And there it is. And I'm just going to fill it with like just a solid gray right now. We'll see how it looks. And then I'm going to squash it. I'll just take my pointer, click on it, and squash it down. And I'm going to skew it. You might think, well, where's skew? Now, Illustrator has a skew tool, and it's not easy to use. But if you come over here to transform, they have a skew here. It'll let me, actually, I don't know if you even have to go in there. I think if you hover over, if you go on the line here, it's really hard. If you go right on the line, you'll see that weird one arrow going in one direction, one arrow in the other, and then you just go sideways. And that's skewing it. And try to, actually, if you hold shift, I think it goes straight over. So I'm just going to skew it a little. You see what it's doing? It's taking it, like if you took regular straight text and you made it italic, that's kind of what it's doing. And then I'm going to squash it down even more. And then I'm just going to put it here and try to stick it behind the mug. So I'll just drag it down to the bottom. And there it is behind the mug. Now, if you wanted to lighten it up, you could even just turn the opacity down. That's probably the easiest thing to do. I don't think I'm going to blur it or do anything like that right now, although there probably is a blur option. Can we blur it? Oh, look at that. Oh, that's really nice. I didn't even think of that, but we could blur it. I'll turn down the effect a little bit. I don't want it blurred a lot, just a little. And that looks nice. You have the opacity down, we blurred it. That's kind of a pixel-based thing that we're kind of doing there, but that looks nice. We just added a little blur and a little bit of skewing on that, and we're good. Again, it's not super realistic, but for our exercise 4 in Illustrator, that's pretty good. So that's our mug, our apple, and our butterflies, and they're all in one file. So I'll make sure I save if I haven't saved recently, and then I'll be able to look at this and say, oh, there's your butterflies, there's your apple, and there's your mug. And again, we're going to be doing more things with anchor points after this, but this was just a little bit of exercise just to have us go over those operations, because sometimes they can really be a time saver before you start messing around with anchor points. If you could do things as simple as possible to start, why not? And then when you need to tweak them, then you could get into the anchor points. So those are our 3 files here, using some of the compound path operations like union, subtract, intersection, and a lot of these things, after we've been doing them, we've been converting them to path using the squiggle or the convert to path, so it's just one single path, which will make life a little bit easier. It kind of keeps things simpler in terms of the way it's working with the files and things like that, and working with paths. So that's our BF Apple Mug. When you're done with it, you're going to share it and copy this, and then go back to My Warren. And then when you go to coursework, you're going to scroll down to Unit 4, and you'll see BF Apple Mug, and you'll click here, and you'll just add a comment, and you'll add a link, and you'll paste your link, your Gravit link, and target new window, and hit OK. And that should be it. And you could test it then too. If there's any problem, if you test it and it doesn't work, because one thing just to point out here, make sure, let me X out of here, make sure that this is saved. So if you might have been working and then you're going to share it, make sure that you always do a final save and make sure that you sync it before sharing. And even if you're not sure if you did or not, because you don't want to see an asterisk there. You don't want to see that. So, and you want to see this grayed out. That means it's completely saved. So if you're ever not sure, just do that and then share it, copy it. You could go back here and edit it, and you just wipe this out if you want. Just wipe it out, add a link, paste it again, choose new window. Believe me, it makes life easier for me if you choose new window here. Please do that, because hitting the back button, it just has a hard time getting back out of Gravit and getting into My Warren. So choose new window here and hit OK. And that way you're kind of better off. So make sure that you always save it and sync it before sharing. And if it's taking a while, just wait it out to do it. And hit save. And that's it. And then when I click on it, I'll be able to see your file, see your layers, see everything in there, see everything in Gravit, just like you do. So that's exercise 4, using compound shapes with BF Apple Mug.